Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we conclude this section of our Sexy Vampire Retrospective with Jim Jarmusch's 2013 film, The Only Lovers Left Alive. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it, so warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the Alex Van Helsing series from HarperCollins. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth Studios, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire, co-creator of Clockworks from Humanoid. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, editor-in-chief of HorrorMovies.net, writer for Rockabilly Online, and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello.
It's good to be back.
It's good to have you back. I'm so glad to talk to you. Adam did fantastic yeoman's work last week on Embrace of the Vampire, a movie that I am sorry that you had to miss, and we're happy to have you back.
Oh, I've seen it. It's okay.
So you didn't miss it, like the rest of us want to miss it.
Tony, how did you feel about that movie? I can't remember.
Oh man,
Drew,
Drew, you can just handle it by just be like, it's not like I missed it.
I don't think we need to relitigate.
I feel like Maxwell Smart missed it by that much.
By that much. By just a trip down I-35. And finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hola.
Hola. Okay, according to Wikipedia and others, Only Lovers Left Alive, there's no "the" in front of it, is a 2013 internationally co-produced vampire film written and directed by Jim Jarmusch and starring Tilda Swinton, Tom Hiddleston, and John Hurt. It was nominated for the Palme d'Or at the 2013 Cannes Film Festival, and it tells the story of two vampires living out what may be their final days on modern Earth, which has become dissolute, predictable, and contaminated. This is an arty vampire film. I can't wait to hear what people think about it, how it fits into this Sexy Vampire Retrospective, how it fits into vampire stuff in general. Well, let's talk about all that stuff. Let's start with Drew. We'll go Drew, Tony, Joya, and then if I have anything left, I'll say it. Drew, opening thoughts, Only Lovers Left Alive.
Well, this is a movie that I had not seen before. It has come highly recommended to me through people that I know. I know a lot of our listeners on Facebook seem to be pretty keen on it as well. But it's funny, when I did my Facebook post that I was watching this film, my brother-in-law, who is a big art house movie aficionado, said, "Well, you know what this movie's gonna be like, right? You know this isn't like a regular vampire movie, right? You know it's not a horror film, right?" And actually, I am familiar with the directors of their films. I've seen, I think, at least I think I've seen most of them, so I'm aware of his style. And this movie was basically exactly what I was expecting it to be, which is Jim Jarmusch doing Anne Rice in the way that he would do it, because this seems very much, well, it's just sort of watching vampires do the stuff that vampires might get up to before the vampire movie actually gets started. Like that's how this movie vibes to me. And I feel like, I don't want to jump too far ahead till the ending, but I'm just going to say this in my opening thoughts. I feel like the ending of the film, like the actual last scene in the movie, is actually where like your typical vampire movie would start. This is mostly just vampires hanging out doing stuff, but it's fun to watch. I mean, the cast is good. It's got a great soundtrack, which is what you would sort of expect from one of his films. I love the fact that it starts with a Wanda Jackson song. I thought that was awesome. But does it have anything terribly new to say about vampires? Probably not. Like a lot of the stuff that I've seen this movie that I think maybe the art house crowd is patting themselves on the back for being really clever, I've actually seen in other movies, right down to The Wooden Bullet. So at the same time, it's an entertaining movie, but I don't think it's quite as clever as others I don't think it's quite as clever as other critics might have thought it to be.
Wow. That's a really good start. That's really great. Tony, what are your thoughts?
I liked it a lot. I don't think Rain was as enamored because of the pacing. for myself, I think it's got a lot of really cool things. I'm kind of torn. I wonder if it is a deep movie or if it's one of the movies that people watch and think that it's deep and insist that it's deep because it says all these pseudo deep things. And that the more it's like I said, I'm torn. On the one hand, there's a lot of stuff in there that's pretty cool. On the other hand, I've seen a lot of the stuff, and it definitely, channels Anne Rice and a lot of other things. I could have also dealt with a lot, like 200% less blood as heroin drug allegory, which is just, again, honey baked fist to your face. Oh man, look how edgy. Look, they look kind of heroin. Oh, look at their faces when they drink blood. See? It's like an addiction, like heroin. Let's romanticize that yet again. If people didn't get it, rock and roll people sometimes are addicted to heroin. Like this, look at their skinniness. Oh my gosh, they're doing rock and roll things. All that crap. I don't know. That part really kind of soured me. But it's beautifully shot. It's really actually in a lot of ways kind of the antithesis to Embrace of the Vampire.
Yeah.
And say the 2000, there's not much action in it. It meanders in really cool ways in a lot of ways. But like I said, I'm kind of torn. I'm not positive for me. And again, your mileage may vary if it's nearly as clever as it thinks it is or wants you to think it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really fabulous. Okay. Julia, where did you come down?
I agree with a lot of what Drew and Tony both have said. I thought I was going to like it because it looked cool when I was looking, visually it looked pretty cool. And then I ended up not liking it because of the fact that, as it put, the very first line in the IMDb trivia is, there was some action in the film at first, but when Jim Jarmusch was asked to add more, he instead removed all of it, which I just thought was really funny, but true. It was absolutely true. I agree 100% with what Drew was saying, that it feels like all the stuff leading up to the movie, and then the movie starts and then it's over. But yeah, so I found it way too slow, way too repetitive. I agree with what Tony was saying about how it's like, okay, we get it about the addiction, or we get it about the depression, or we get it that they're deep, but not really, or we get that they knew a lot of artsy people and that Christopher Marlowe is their best friend. We get it. And it's like, I just feel like you're getting hit over the head with this stuff, and there's so much space between the lines and between the scenes, and just nothing happening. And I just kind of got bored with it. So I almost feel like if you go into it with the idea that you're looking at a piece of art and literally just looking at it, then it's fine. But if you actually expect to have a story and any kind of action or plot, then no, it's not. This is not for you.
That's wonderful. Okay, to me, to some extent, okay, I like everything that you guys have said, and the things that you guys have said have actually made me more forgiving of the film, because Drew, instead of I was thinking this movie thought that it was being clever by doing stuff that Anne Rice actually had already been doing, so that they're saying all these things about beauty and about decadence and vampires as rockers and all that stuff. And I was like, Interview with a Vampire came out in 1976. So none of those are new ideas. So to the extent that we're supposed to be sore amazed at it, I found that tiresome. But if you think of it as kind of a Jim Jarmusch sort of response to Anne Rice or commentary on Anne Rice, yeah, I guess I can kind of dig that. I have watched movies where
there was
nothing
a version.
happened.
Wait, there was a version of Interview with a Vampire that came out in '76.
Novel. The novel came out in 1976.
The novel.
Yeah,
oh, okay. I thought you were talking about the movie. I was like, that was the '90s. Yes. Okay,
you're right.
Sorry.
No, for sure. But yeah, the novel came out in 76. So all that stuff dates way back. And even, before that, the Saint Germain. My point is, there's nothing here that has, literally through the whole movie, there is nothing new. Nothing. And so I found myself thinking the same thing that I thought when I watched Scream. And I was like, I know this movie is something that everybody talks about as it knows so much about horror movies. But the things it knows are things that you could do from like looking at horror movies for like 3 weeks and then thinking that you know a lot about horror movies. This movie is a smart movie about vampires by somebody who's been looking at vampires for about a month. I mean, it's, yeah, blah blah blah. Tesla, oh how
I don't
skinny.
think you're giving Jim Jarmusch enough credit here. I think
Maybe, I mean,
that
that I don't know. The stuff about joking about day for night, like there's so many jokes, like gags, like real genuine gags about getting up early because the sun is about to come up and blah blah blah. All that stuff is like, to me, is like sitcom level humor that is given this gravity by, they say, you know what, I tell you what, before you read the line, Hiddleston, go ahead and pause for 30 seconds. And then when you give me this sitcom line, it'll be deeper than and so I just found myself really just not happy with the film. But I like Jim Jarmusch. I love Down by Law. I liked Dead Man, okay, But anyway, my point is though, that's where I was coming in. But having listened to you guys, I think I might be coming along in a slightly different direction. That maybe to some extent there's some commentary going on here. There's some meta. I don't know. It's tough. Let's get into it. To the extent that another place, by the way, as we go through, to the extent that I'm slaughtering this movie, I have to very carefully question myself. Like, who the hell do I think I am that I can be this harsh on a movie by an auteur like Jim Jarmusch and so easy on a completely moronic piece of work like Embrace of the
That's
Vampire?
because you have higher standards for Jim Jarmusch, and so you expect
possible.
him to meet them. But I wanted to hear what Drew was going to say. I want to hear what Drew was going to say about how you're wrong.
Yeah.
well, it's not so much that he's wrong. It's that I think that, look, Jim Jarmusch is a movie buff, and he's a pop culture buff, and I think that's very clear from all of his films. You know, like the choices of music, like it's funny, like we talked about Anne Rice and about how this is him doing Anne Rice, but at the same time, like, I'm married to a musician, I'm around musicians, and Tony might feel differently about this, granted, but like this, like the musician talk about gear, like the point where him and the Anton Yelchin character are sitting around and talking about guitars and amps and all that stuff. Yeah, that sounds 1,000 times more legitimate and more how those people talk than anything in an interview with a vampire.
With you. Yeah, I agree with you. I also, though, think this is another thing, like having, and maybe I'm different, but I do. I mean, I also, talk to people about gear. We talk about stuff like I'm recording, so we're talking about like, hey, play this pedal on this song and such like that. The problem is with that talk, we'll start there. It's so pointed, like, oh, look at the lines on this 70 blah 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 blah. Isn't that rare? Why, yes, this is a thing that people will talk about because I found this thing written that this is rare. Wouldn't a musician who's been around a long time like this guitar? Of course, because we found this out and how rare this is. It's so, to me, and again, I go with, I'm pointing like Jason, like, this is, I mean, it's beautifully shot. Jarmusch is, like, who am I? What have I created that's like Jim Jarmusch? Nothing in comparison. I mean, he's an auteur. He's won multiple awards. This is a beautiful film. To cut it up this way feels weird because I probably, and many people, I don't hold a candle to this person in almost anything I've created. Like, I'll hands down say that. Like, it's weird. But when I listen to this, maybe it's because being too close to the material or whatever, it just felt like, man, I don't know people who aren't trying to impress each other who speak that way.
Well, that's what when it came on.
Sorry.
I was going to say when that scene came on, I said it's guitar porn because they're just like, salivating all over these guitars.
I definitely see people like that. I'm not saying that they cannot be completely, especially Gretsch people. Like I was just at a festival that was sponsored by Gretsch, so there was a lot of people talking up Gretsch guitars, and they talk just like, hell, maybe they're vampires. I don't know. But they talk just like that.
There's comparing gear, which will often like, what do you play? Oh, I'll play this.
Yeah.
Oh, this is,
like
this
I found that to be.
No. There's a difference between comparing gear. What do you play? Are those pickups active or not? Not the lines of this are so cutting edge and rare. Do you see the intricacies of the hollow body? Like that stuff, when that's basically, if people are talking like that, they're not showing it. That's just dick waving.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm saying
they're so picked. That's what I'm saying is they're so picked. Again, this is probably minor in most people's opinion, but as a musician, it seems so. And yet another rare guitar. Here's some dick waving bullshit about that. Like I don't know that all of that stuff just that bugs me because on the surface, again, I think this is the deal. On the surface, it sounds like musicians, but it's trying to be so much more deep and like cool than it actually is in reality, considering we're supposed to see a slice of life reality of vampires.
Yeah. The point I'm trying to make is this is going back to where I started when I'm saying maybe we aren't giving Jim Jarmusch enough credit for the way these vampires are portrayed, is that I think he has looked at a lot of vampire movies and read a lot of vampire stuff, and I actually would call the dialogue here coming around to like the Adam, the main vampire, is supposed to be a little bit of a dick waver.
True.
Like he's stuck on himself, and apparently, we're supposed to get the idea that he was at some point a rock star of some sort. So like I'm not saying that he comes off as cool, and I don't even necessarily think that Jim Jarmusch thinks he's cool. Like I think he probably thinks that he's a stuffed shirt. At least
I actually think Jim Jarmusch does think he's cool, but he has the cleverness to have the other characters make fun of him a little bit. But the thing of it is, I think the reason why we tend to pick on these characters this much about this, because all of us are circling around much the same stuff, is that to the extent that we might be annoyed by or not annoyed by listening to these people constantly just whine on about whatever the hell they're whining on about, is that that's the whole movie. Because if this is a scene where they're going to whine about something and then they're going to engage in a little bit of plot and then whine about something, that would be something else. But this movie is mostly metropolitan with vampires. It's just people sitting around being vampires and whining.
No, it's totally aimless. It's totally aimless. But I will say this, like, so have been a lot of the other movies we've done in this retrospective. It's weird
that's
how this
worth
is
thinking
like
about.
The art version of that.
No, totally. And that's worth thinking about because, like, you and I have talked about, like, Let's Scare Jessica to Death, right? We talked about how that has kind of a sleepy, dreamy mood. And you found that one a little bit boring. And we talked about Nosferatu, how Nosferatu has kind of a sleepy feel to it. And I can't figure out why I liked those two movies more and this one less. Unless it's Tony's thesis that it's the pretension of the characters. It's possible. I don't know.
I just feel like the pretension of the characters is on purpose. Like, I think Jim Jarmusch knows this guy is pretentious. Like, that's possible. That's the only difference between where Tony's coming from and where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm. I agree that, and again, I knew full well what kind of movie I was getting into. Like, I have no qualms about, like, I knew this was a character piece. No action. Like, this is, you're going to watch vampires do, rock star druggy vampire things. I had no pretension, no expectations for anything else. I mean, and Jarmusch can shoot a film. I mean, it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like I said, what I keep coming back to is how maybe I'm not as deep as, or I'm just like, maybe I've seen, if you hang out with enough people though too, you can spot the people who are actually deep and soulful, and the people who are just dead set on convincing you how deep and soulful they are.
Well, I don't think they're even deep and soulful. I think they're intellectual snobs. Like, I think it's that they're super arrogant, because the whole thing, it's not about being deep, it's about how many artists they know. I mean, the pictures on the freaking wall, good Lord, it's like, every author and some really cool musicians. It's like, look how cool I am that I've met all these people. It's the biggest name-dropping wall I've ever seen.
Yes.
Well, he also calls
people,
normal people zombies.
We should describe them a little bit. We should go ahead and describe the characters just so that we're going to segue that general aria that we just sang into kind of discussing who these characters are. So yeah, Tom Hiddleston to start with is Adam.
And Eve, but he didn't name Adam and Eve after Adam and Eve of the Bible. In fact, he was dismayed to realize that people would think of it that way because he named him after Mark Twain's The Diaries of Adam and Eve. But anyway, they're both they're both these super old vampires. And another thing I learned from reading the IMDb trivia is that he gave them ages, but then he didn't have them. This makes me laugh because, come on, really, he didn't have them say how old they were because they wouldn't have any reason to say that to each other because they would know already. But he just has the age, and I'm just laughing. I'm like, that's the thing that you've decided that we're gonna not do.
Right.
But anyway, so yeah, apparently she's like a 2,000-year-old, Celtic something or other, and like Druidic queen or something. Anyway, and then he's like 500 or 600 years old. But she is, of course, very, very, very pale and white, and she's got like this wig. This would be Tilda Swinton, has this wig made of like part human hair and part yak hair, apparently goat hair, so that she's just all wild and bizarre. And then Tom Hiddleston is just kind of your typical rocker guy, and they're both...
He's Lestat, basically.
He's Lestat, and he's super depressed and bored, and he wants to kill himself, and so he gets himself a really fancy wooden bullet. The other thing that makes me say that they're like intellectual snobs or whatever is that he knows all the kinds of wood and she knows every Latin name for everything and just insists on saying it. And it's just kind of, I don't know. But so he's incredibly bored and incredibly cynical, and he's tired of the zombie people, which is all the people who are zombies, and all of their BS. And he's got his buddy. Oh, and we should say, by the way, that since we've done this film in a year after Anton Yelchin has passed away, and John Hurt, that they're both in this movie, and Anton is his like kind of buddy who gets him, does him favors and hangs out. And I almost feel like the film would have been so much more interesting if we had followed Anton, and then these vampires had just been people that he was kind of obsessed with, but we were actually following him.
God, what a good movie that would be. If it had been about Anton Yelchin's character, and he's got to deal with these insane vampires who are like calling him up and asking him for special wine or whatever the hell he has to go pick up for them, and like, it'd be so funny if they're constantly like asking him for special wood and calling it by Latin names, and I mean, that would be hilarious.
It could be about him and Jeffrey Wright, who is Dr. Watson, quote unquote, and he's like the blood supplier. So the two of them could just kind of be comparing notes about these insane people that they have to deal with. I
love that idea. Yes. Yep. That would, and I realize that's more pedestrian. That'd be more approachable. It'd be like, oh, sure, we're going to follow the normal guy instead of hanging out with
I feel like then it'd be more like Shaun of the Dead, where it'd kind of be like, wait, what's going on in the background?
Right. Absolutely.
What are they doing?
Except that movie doesn't allow you to pat yourself on the back for being as cool as the characters in there.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
You can't be the new age beatnik. You can't be this century's beatnik, snapping your fingers and patting yourself on the back on how cool that you get. That's a Gretsch guitar, and that Jack White lives over there, and that Detroit somehow will come back because music will save it. You can't pat yourself on the back for all these things if you go with a pedestrian movie. Again, I say these things knowing full well that most of what I've created is pedestrian, probably at best, and I'm critiquing a master. But when I look at these things, this is what I struggle with. Like I really do enjoy this movie, but I also I know people who would break it out to be something way more than what it is. Maybe that's what bugs me, which is stupid anyway. But I don't know.
You keep saying that we can't critique a master or you feel weird about it, but I think it's totally okay to say, well, this could have been better and this could have been better and this could have been better. I mean, that's literally we place ourselves in the role of critic each week, so that's literally what we're supposed to be doing. So it's okay.
Okay.
I couldn't make any of the films that we critiqued.
I don't think I could make Embrace of the Vampire. So I mean, I accept what you're saying. So all of us have acknowledged that we all have humility, and we all have respect for the director. But yeah, Tony, I hear totally where you're coming from. Gosh, so Anton Yelchin plays the Fixer. And, this young man who is easily intimidated by Tom Hiddleston, but is the only one who has the right to go in to Tom Hiddleston's place. Because Tom Hiddleston, like I say, he's like Lestat. He's basically a former rock star who people who hunt up rock stars want to know where he lives, and so this is all intimate. Considering how much talking is done, there's almost never any exposition. So everything's always suggested, and you're supposed to sort of draw your own conclusions. I don't begrudge the film that. I actually like that kind of thing, where you're supposed to kind of put
give me that any day over just I'm gonna exposition constantly. I mean, it's again, there is a lot of really interesting dialogue and a lot of really cool stuff there. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed that. I would rather have that. I think too many movies do talk down to the viewer.
Well, yeah. Sure. How refreshing is it to watch a movie that jumps between two cities? Like, there was never a point in this movie where they put in giant words on the screen, Detroit. They just let you figure out the dialogue and through little visual cues that you were in Detroit. And I found that very refreshing.
I disagree. I think they hit you over the head with the fact that it's Detroit. I think they said it over and over and over again. He was like,
but they never, like if this were a Michael Bay movie.
Well,
They do that once they actually get. If they do that once they actually get into Detroit, but they never have the moment where they're like, "Oh, I'm going to Detroit." Instead, you have to see that, like, on the doctor's mug, it says "I love Detroit" on there. Like, there's never. If this was a Michael Bay movie, they would put in gigantic neon letters, Detroit, Michigan.
Yeah. Maybe, but I did feel like, again, I was going, okay, we get it, Detroit, especially when he's like talking about what used to be there and how there used to be a car factory.
I like that. I like that one.
I thought that whole scene was hysterical.
I really did like the thing about the car park that was a theater. That was beautiful. I loved that.
Nice, yeah.
Like, I love Miami Vice, okay? I'm going to say this and I sound like such a moron, okay? But I love Miami Vice. And one of my favorite episodes is Out Where the Buses Don't Run. And that's one where this retired detective comes back and they need him to help to try to find a missing drug dealer who may or may not have been killed 20 years ago. And they have some scenes in there where the whole damn thing just stops and they drive across bridges, and you look at how beautiful the bridges are in Miami and you hear awesome music. But it is in the middle of a plot about a detective who has come back to find a missing drug dealer and who might be crazy. That's I think the thing I'm missing. I think I hate to say it, but I really think I'm wanting a plot in this film more than what there is, because I think these wonderful little doses would be better as small moments amongst stuff that's moving story along. I don't know, and
they almost set you up for there to be a plot, because they keep having like dreams about the sister Ava.
Yeah, I mean, there's a basic plot.
She's going to be like this evil vampire queen, and then when we finally get her, she's just kind of a bratty teenager.
Oh yes. Man, I was so hoping he would have used that bullet on her.
Yes,
every second that she just started being her, because I've known people like her more than I want to know. And in this case, I was like, so he uses that bullet on her, right? Like, please.
Yeah.
Well, there's another. I actually did think that he was going to have to shoot her. But I got to say, another thing that super annoyed me about her was that isn't she also really old? Like, shouldn't she be a few hundred years old? Why is this the first time she's ever been near a drum set or a guitar? Why has she never, ever been around musical instruments?
No, it's not that. It's not that she is bratty and just doesn't care. She's superficial, so she has never played those instruments in any capacity where she wanted to learn. She's a narcissist. She's a terrible person. Art is not in her blood. Art is not something she aspires to. Being a brat and just living in her YOLO moment forever that's her thing. So she is interested in a thing only for as long as it's cool to do that, and then she's on to the next thing. Therefore, she's never learned anything of substance
which is a well-designed character. I have to admit, that's well-designed. I mean, it's.
I know people like that.
I think if it's going to be a truly deep movie, which is not, but if it were going to, I think that we should find out why she is how she is, and she should have some kind of moment of clarity, even if it doesn't last, even if she goes back to being her bratty self. There should have been something to show us some more substance for her instead of just having her be a brat for no reason.
People like her never have a moment of clarity. That's what makes her a pure character. That character.
No, but they do have them, and then they go away, and then they back off of them. Like, they'll suddenly go, maybe it's because in her case, it'd be maybe it was because my father, vampired me, sired me, or whatever. But I mean, the point is, like, she has some moment of what horrible thing happened, and then they go back to, oh wait, no, I don't want to be this person. I want to be,
You can know those people, and you can meet them at a party, and you can see them later around town, and you can even hang out with them and other people you would rather hang out with. And they are that's the purest form. That person is real, and they are terrible people, and they very rarely have moments of clarity like what you're talking about. It's certainly not enough. Those are the same people who will tell you, like, oh, you're an artist? I can't even draw a straight line. But never will ever try, like, even if they tell you they're interested in it, will never try to draw a straight line. It's a superficial excuse to just be, man, that'd be cool. And that's that character. And that's, again, why the wooden bullet should have been for her.
But it is this character that I feel like that this movie is ultimately best viewed almost as a parody of Anne Rice.
Sure.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that. What do you say more about that, Drew? Why is this character the one that's most like Anne Rice?
Well, because they build her up so much. Like, you have John Hurt, like R.I.P. John Hurt, by the way.
That was sad.
Who is, of course, going to add gravity to anything he says because he has that voice. And, he's the first person that brings this care. Oh, I had a dream about your sister. And, everybody has this worried tone about Ava up until the point where we actually see her. And then she's exactly as Tony described. She's this if she was a human girl, she'd be the sort of girl that would be doing like 150 selfies a second.
Yeah.
She'd be constantly checking her Twitter feed. Everybody's seen this type of person before.
Oh, yeah.
And so the fact that you go from just this gravity of like, oh no, this chick is bad news, and those of you who have seen and read vampire stuff, like all of us, are thinking, oh, this character is going to be bad news, and then you end up with what we actually get, which is this sort of hipster / bimbo.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's incredibly funny to me. At least I found it to be. And
she reminds me of the kind of person who you might invite over to your apartment, and then suddenly she's going to be staying at the apartment for several days, and then she gets you kicked out of your apartment by burning something or or
killing your friend, like drinking him.
Well, yeah,
that was actually the only thing I thought was funny, pretty much in the whole movie. Maybe is when he's like, "You drank Ian. You drank Ian." That was kind of funny, but other than that, no.
Well, also, I feel sick. Well, of course, he worked in the music industry. What did you expect?
That was a good line too.
Yeah, that was clever. Yeah. Those were funny lines, and they weren't I don't know. I'm just saying that. Yeah, sometimes sometimes they do come up with good lines.
Well, she comes over and
Absolutely.
drinks all their blood as well, which is, the same as taking all
Oh
their drugs.
God,
Like, she
that
took all their
just
drugs. Like,
such a narcissist. Like, oh my God. The notion that she would come in, she has no compunction about just consuming everything they have. Yeah, no, she needs to be destroyed. I mean, in Interview with the Vampire, they take Claudia and like they leave her out to die in the sun because they're like, this thing is bad news. We cannot have her
yeah,
around.
well,
Okay.
I mean, she does bust up his guitar, his 1905 guitar,
Yeah, man.
and his
No, no,
like,
no. She needs to be
while
like,
insisting that
yeah.
she should be able to download his music. Like, can I download? No, like, just no. So there, like, again, there's a bunch of really great parts. Oh, by the way, the band that's actually in there, which they name drop, but I've seen them live and talked to
Oh,
them
yeah.
briefly. White Hills. I will say, if you want some cool psychedelic music, White Hills delivers. That band is awesome. So I had forgotten. I know they mentioned something about being in a movie at the time, and I guess this was they mentioned it live, and I'd totally forgotten. Then I was watching. I was like, oh man, that's White Hills. That's really cool. They are really great, and they were really cool live. If you're not into kind of drony psychedelic stuff, it's probably not your bag. But they put on a great show, and yeah, I had to. I mean, I bought albums because I was or CDs as it will, because they were really really great. So you should check
It's
them
a
out.
really great scene. It's
Yeah,
a
no,
beautiful
I think
scene.
the bar is
Yeah.
cool. Like it's the appropriate level of divey. There's a place that we play from time to time that I really like called the Lost Well. Since people who run it are awesome. Dusty, who books there, is great, and the whole staff of Lost Well. But it's this divey place. It reminded me of like, yeah, I need to go back and see more shows there, and play there again. But yeah, so all that is really cool, and you should definitely buy some White Hills if you like what they were doing in the movie. They do that, and they do it extremely well. I was pleasantly surprised that if there's any number of bands it could have been. I'm glad it was them, and yeah, that was really cool. Although,
They-
again, all the people there are the other people. You're like, oh, I know this scene. You know, and sometimes it's really cool, and sometimes it's like that, where it's a lot of people going to a place to be seen and be cool and show up to be cool, as opposed to coming and just really enjoying the music. I mean, they paid their way in, and the band gets the money, so whatever.
sure.
I'm happy that there's people there for a show. But sometimes you'll go to a show and you're just like, wow, everybody's here just to be cool, huh? And I'm never cool. So there you go. Maybe that's my own cross to bear. I'm never cool.
You're cool to us, Tony. We think you're cool.
Yeah,
Awesome. Thanks for the vote of
Definitely.
confidence.
Let me put it this way: you're definitely cooler than Jason and me. So that's
that's
something.
for sure. Yeah.
I've made my peace with all of this, but like, especially in Austin, you can go to shows where the consensus of the show is that everybody showed up to be cooler than the next person. And that's this kind of scene. Except White Hills usually doesn't play those shows, and they should do that. They should come back to Austin. I would love to see them. Anyway, there's part of my endorsement, I suppose. But
Wow. And actually, that's not the only musician who's featured in the film. There's two, and both of them are real because they got White Hills, who they go see in Detroit when they wear their sunglasses, and they're awesome. And then there's Yasmin Hamdan, who is who they see in Morocco, who is also totally real, and they just stop to let them perform. And look, I dig this that Jarmusch wants, because the characters love music. Jarmusch has the movie just stops for a while for these in film
Well,
performances.
I mean, Jarmusch likes music. I mean, I think that
Yeah.
as much as I feel like he's kind of having a go at how ridiculous musicians can be at times, I do think he ultimately likes musicians. I mean, if you look at the way he uses music, and not just this movie, but like a lot of his other movies, I think it's pretty clear he really likes music. And and he doesn't always, we were just talking about Peaky Blinders and like the use of like the same obvious song over and over again. He's a filmmaker, I feel like, that usually doesn't fall into that trap too. Like, I can't really think of like a time where I watching one of his movies and he picks a song and I'm kind of like, oh man, that song has been used to death. Like he tends to keep it a little, again, like the fact that this movie starts with Funnel of Love, which is a Wanda Jackson song. It's a popular Wanda Jackson song, but I can't really think of it being used a lot in movies. So
I like his soundtrack to Dead Man as well. Like, I mean,
yeah.
He's no slouch when it comes to music, that's for sure.
No, clearly, and yeah, that's. By the way, I think to some extent Jarmusch probably, he looks like he could be a character in this film. I have to point out, if you look at a picture of Jim Jarmusch, he seems like a highly cultured individual who is kind of living on a different wavelength from everybody else. I sense that well, I'm torn. I hope that there's still a great deal of satire going on here, and I can't tell. To the extent that he thinks he's like these people, it makes me lose some respect for Jim Jarmusch because these people are tiresome to me. But, whereas Jim Jarmusch seems pretty interesting. But I don't know. Okay, we should mention John Hurt. You did mention him briefly. John Hurt plays, are you ready for this? Christopher Marlowe. he plays
and not just Christopher Marlowe, but Christopher Marlowe in the legend or myth where he's actually William Shakespeare and wrote all of Shakespeare's plays.
Yeah. The Marlovian theory is that Christopher Marlowe, English writer and educated and so forth, faked his death and then continued to write, assuming the name of an ineffectual and unimportant an uneducated man named William Shakespeare, and published all of Shakespeare's plays. It is a snobby and ultimately unlikely theory that just, as always, rubbed me the wrong way. It's a favorite theory for people to get into because it's clever. I mean, it involves a famous writer faking his death, first of all, which is, that's pretty cool. But it also has at its heart.
People love a good conspiracy theory anyway.
Yeah. No, it's true. But it has at its heart a snobbiness that I find really distasteful, which is that regular old Bill Shakespeare couldn't possibly have written such beautiful things. And I just always found that troublesome. Go ahead, Drew.
Well, that's because he wasn't Marlowe.
Right.
Well, the thing that's interesting here is that he's taken this crackpot theory, really, and spun it on it. Is that excuse me? The reason why Marlowe faked his death is because he was turned into a vampire.
Yeah. Yeah. True. And that's
great.
neat.
Yeah, that's one of the few actually clever things in the movie, and I like the through line of his character, because one of the things in this movie is that human blood is now becoming more and more toxic.
Yeah.
Because of the environment and because of drugs or whatever. And so when we first
see some bloodborne disease, we get
bloodborne diseases, things like that. So when we first see Marlowe, we first see Marlowe, he's this aged vampire walking around on crutches, which is not an image that we are used to in vampire movies. So I thought actually he was probably the most interesting character in the movie to me, and maybe because he was a fictionalized version of a historical figure, and I always, for some reason, like that kind of thing. But I wish they could have shown more of his degeneration throughout the film.
Well, it's really great to see. I mean, again, for as much crap as given parts of this, there's such great bits. His person, his helper, his human, his zombie helper, they have genuine affection for each other. And first was a master, like there's, he actually has respect for this person in a lot of ways. I mean, he's probably, you get the impression he's probably snobby that way from time to time to that dude as well. But there is a genuine respect and admiration that we don't see, despite the fact of how old he is. We get the impression he probably is as old as these characters. Also seeing him at kind of this aged version where he loses himself in, thinking about things 200 years behind, and, he's seen enough that he's very weary of the world. I mean, there's also the great bits of, where they're talking and Eve says, look, and everything's not as bad. What about all the scientists that you had hope for? And he goes through, I was good about that, and then I realized how crappy that was too, and he cites examples. Tesla had this and they destroyed that, and I can understand. I definitely am not as old as a vampire, but I can also understand world weariness, and many times when you see something, you're like, why aren't people more outraged by this? This is, you've got this society that thinks less and less ahead and more towards the moment. These characters kind of they're forced in both realms. They have to live in the moment because not doing that is boring and tedious, but they know that this is possibly forever unless they get tainted blood. And so every day I see something where I'm like, but that's not sustainable. Or if you think just a few steps ahead, maybe that doesn't help you now, but maybe this is better, or could be better, or just think like chess, maybe, and less like a video game. Even though one of my big things is video games, but I don't know. I understand it. I hope that when talking about things to good friends of mine, that if I'm ever this pretentious, I hope somebody goes, "Wow, man, really? Come on." Yeah. You want people to call you out when you are this wrapped up into yourself. I think is what everybody needs.
I agree. And to some extent, you're right. The Tilda Swinton character is in fact calling the character out. And this is a thing that I think I have a problem with in movies in general, and I don't know where I come down exactly. Let's say that the movie is intending to say something and show you something about deep depression, right? And the problem is that, if a movie is about laughing and a lot of funny things happen and it makes you laugh, you feel good, and that actually sets off chemicals that make you keep wanting to do that. So the movie goes by in a snap. It's very easy to watch a film like this. But a movie that's deeply depressing is actually hard to watch for 90 minutes. It becomes an exercise. And that's just always been this problem. And it's just in the same manner that making a movie about war, no matter how much you want to make war seem bad, generally always makes war seem interesting. And, unless you find a way to make war boring, like The Thin Red Line, and then what you wind up with is a boring war movie that nobody wants to watch. And I mean, that's true, right? And so I don't know. This movie is trying to say something about sadness and depression, but consequently, it's hard to watch. But if they made it an interesting movie, maybe there was a plot, maybe one of them fell in love for the first time in years, or maybe this sister was actually going to poison everybody in Detroit, or whatever, then occasionally they could stop and show how depressed they were. But the thing is, that wouldn't say much about depression, because we'd actually be focused mainly on what's feeding our interest, which is this plot. It's a tough thing. It's tough to make a good commentary on something nobody wants to see.
I think it also you bring into it what I always go back to the pop culture reference of the tree and Empire. I think a lot of times we come into the theater and you bring whatever is with you into the theater a lot of times. And so if you've dealt with depression or any kind of mental illness on a daily or level, hourly, whatever, or people who have been affected, which is most of us probably do, it's different from the person who wants to go into a movie to feel something, because not everybody can relate. They come out of a it's or like listening to sad music. Some people listen to sad music when they're sad because it's cathartic. And other people this is too sad, I can't listen to this because I'll go further down.
It's a good point.
Really your personal taste. Some people go into a movie. I tend to not see. There's many important movies that are, say, about couples breaking up or terrible, or alcoholics, or you name it. I can see that or know people who are affected by that or whatever. I tend to not see as many of those movies. I tend to see lighter fare, and not to say maybe not a Fantastic Fest, and not to say I won't see movies like this. But I tend to see, if I know first, there was a DiCaprio movie where he's in a bad relationship, and was it Revolutionary Road or whatever? I saw the trailers and I'm like, you know what, man? that's like reality. I would prefer to see,
Yeah, no,
something
and
not that. And so
And we
And I'm the
need-
opposite.
yeah.
I'm the
Okay.
opposite. I'm the opposite. I want to see movies that really make me feel things or that connect with something that I have felt. So that because I just get, I kind of have ADD or whatever. I get really bored with regular life, and I have a pretty awesome life, and so I don't tend to have a lot of real drama in my life. So therefore, but I still want to have those feelings just to kind of know I'm alive, basically. So I really enjoy watching things that make me feel deeply, because then I'm like, okay, I don't have anything, thankfully, I'm very thankful for this, horrible happening in my life, but I want to be able to still get in touch with those parts of myself just to kind of know that they're there, So I do seek stuff like that out.
That's interesting. I often wonder myself, it's so realistic. And that I can see that or maybe experience or remember things to the extent that, man, I don't want to relive any of that or feel any of that because it's so omnipresent in our world. And I have zero interest in a movie that has to make that sole purpose is to make me feel those things that I would be fine if I never experienced or saw people in a terrible relationship or divorce or any of that. And I find it fascinating. You've actually summed up when I go, man, who's watching that movie and why? Again, these are what you bring to it. This is why cinema is so powerful. Why music, why art is so powerful is those things you can experience. If that's what brings you to the movie, I find that fascinating. It's not my personal place. That's not to say that I just like seeing stupid slapstick comedy all the time or anything. Right?
No, I'm with you.
Like it's not one thing is not the antithesis of the other, but I often avoid just movies that are just about like this movie is about a terrible relationship and a divorce. I would tend to not see that. In this case, one of the things, like I said before, that turned me off to it was this whole romanticization of pretty much heroin. The drug allegory through line throughout this thing, just we've lost some.
Well, Tony,
heroin's a ruiner too. Like, I mean, that drug is a ruiner.
There's also the idea, though, that you watch this stuff to feel better about your own life. Like, that's why a lot of people watch Hoarders, because they're like, oh, I feel so much better about my house watching Hoarders. So a lot of that, too, is going in there going, oh, wow, I thought my life sucked, but it really is pretty awesome compared to these people's lives.
No, but that's terrible. That shows such a lack of empathy.
Thing that Tony's talking about,
yeah.
I don't think that would have bothered me quite so much, except for the fact that there was tons of vampire movies that played off of that idea in the 90s. I feel like that was well worn, and which is why I kind of come around is like, despite and this is why I guess I'm a little bit disappointed by this movie, because I know that Jim Jarmusch is a talent. I don't actually feel like this movie has anything new to say about vampires as an archetype. Like pretty much everything in this movie, that included, I've seen somewhere else. Like the most interesting thing was the sort of blood poisoning, and even that I've seen in other stuff.
Absolutely.
So, like, what I was kind of hoping for from this film, and this is me bringing my own baggage in, rather than just watching the movie on its own terms, admittedly, I kind of was hoping that he would have something new, whereas I feel like instead what we're seeing is almost him lampooning this genre, because it's like, here's a bunch of vampires who literally get up to nothing for an hour and a half. But
if I want, I kind of like, in some ways, again, maybe it is my own kind of talking through this. I think if you're going to lampoon it, it should be What We Do in Shadows, which I find hilarious.
I've heard great.
Maybe, and again, like, this isn't to say like Jarmusch is going to make the films that he's going to make, and they're powerful in many ways and beautiful to look at, and they're going to have awesome music, and it's gonna be an artistic thing. We need that in the world, but comparatively, what do you enjoy? And again, maybe there's, it is what you bring to it. Like, maybe when there's so much like just bad crap around, maybe I'm just like, oh man, I don't want to be depressed like this. Like, there's lots of stuff. And and to talk through the final thing that Julie was talking about, when you're talking, see, I don't have that thing where you're talking about like, oh, watch this and it makes you feel better about yourself. I think,
Yeah.
man, those people are in a terrible position. We're not helping them by showing, look, haha, they're hoarders. Isn't that, look, don't you feel good? You're not that. Instead,
Yeah.
I always feel this is a sickness. These people can't help themselves. I don't feel better about myself. I
Well,
feel
I
terrible
don't
for those
watch.
people.
I don't watch
But
hoarders,
you're
but I
right.
will say watching people who have a sickness is actually really, to me, can be really good for people to understand that kind of person better. So I actually think it's better
Yes.
to see something like that, because then you go, oh wow, those are real people and they're not to be mocked and ridiculed, because you see that they actually have real pain. So I think it's possible that it makes you feel more empathy. And the same thing here with addiction. It's like if you see a film that really explores addiction and for real, it'll make you feel a lot more compassion and empathy for people who have addiction. That's not the case with this movie that we just watched, because here it's just, oh hey, let's all drink, like you said, let's all drink blood and then have ecstatic, like what do you call the shot from above, with the camera shot from above?
Oh, I
where
don't
they,
know. A Pulp
I guess it'd be
Fiction
like
heroin shot, basically.
Yeah, a crane shot or whatever of like the people, just lying back in ecstasy over and over and over. Another thing that you get hit over the head with, that does not help you understand addicts. There's nothing about that makes you go, oh, this is a real illness. It's not, just something. No, you just think these are a bunch of idiots that just want to be high because it's fun.
I mean, except for it doesn't even work all that well, because these are vampires. They need blood to live. It's not the same. And in fact, the problem is...
The addiction is to that special O negative for whatever reason. Like it's like, oh, this is the good stuff. This is the pure stuff or whatever. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I go to, but all of that is drug. Like it has nothing to do with blood. I am in a band, so of course, like, hey, do you want to smoke this? I don't smoke, and I don't really drink that often, and so I've had, man. Well, okay, man, but you're missing out. This is the best stuff.
Yeah.
You have people literally tell you, "Oh, it's the best stuff." Fine, cool, whatever. If it's pot, I don't smoke it, but I don't care if you do. If it's heroin, I have a real problem with that because it's a ruiner. There are many drugs that are ruiners. That is one of them. And so
Tony's absolutely right about that.
Like,
I mean,
like
you
that.
are.
I mean, and so, but again, like, I think what you're like, we're kind of a little bit off topic, but just to wrap it up, Julia, your point about feeling a little bit more empathic in general, a show like Hoarders or any number of those shows you can name, there's a broad spectrum of them, even if it's housewives, because they have these, look at how crazy they are. The vast majority of that is so that you feel better about yourself, and I think that's a pop culture problem that leads to a lot of other things. And this isn't a psychology show, so it's a movie podcast, but I think for the most part it's meant to do that. I think, again, when you are romanticizing, this isn't a movie where you're like, man, that's the effects of addiction. It is a romantic, like, man, look, they're all partying like this. It's the best stuff. Like, man, when you see the reality of that, it is not, you don't get to be vampires. You get to be a burnout or dead.
Yeah.
Or, hopelessly addicted. So I knew somebody who just burnt through a wealth of cash.
Sure.
Like, literally, they were wealthy and then they were not. And all of it went to, in this case, actually heroin. So, like, I don't know. Again, but most people, maybe, hopefully, you never have to see that. You never have to see a friend. And so when you're experiencing this, you're like, oh man, that's cool. That's a neat allegory. Look how that's filmed. That's interesting. Oh, type O negative blood works this way.
I just don't find this all that. I realize to some extent I, as a viewer, am more or less a fetishist when it comes to vampire movies. I would much rather watch a straight, completely unironic vampire film, because it allows me the best view through the movie into where they were in time in America or in Great Britain or Italy or wherever, and what they were thinking about these myths And so to the extent that you get an auteur who's like stacking all this other stuff that he's thinking about and he wants to comment on, the less pure the story gets, and the more it becomes like a meta narrative about this or that or the other thing.
But that's the thing, Jason. That doesn't exist anymore because those movies have already been made. Like
True.
you yourself
very valid
are a
point.
vampire. Yeah, you are a vampire novelist, and even when you go to do your own vampire stories, you mix in spy fiction.
Yeah, you're right.
Very, very few things do straight gothic horror very much, and when they do, they often, unfortunately, because I like that stuff too, but unfortunately, they tend to get canceled or buried or whatever. And
you're right.
I'm not saying that I don't agree with you to a point, but I'm saying like people bring their own points of view. People bring their own points of view. They take these myths and they tell their stories. And I'm not saying that this is the most accomplished vampire movie. I'm glad that I watched it, but I don't think that it had anything great to say. But it was interesting. But to be a purist about it, I still think you have to allow for these kinds of movies to exist because nothing's going to touch those old movies. Those are etched in stone.
Yeah, you're right. It's a really, really valid point. That's to make a movie today. You're right. I write a series of vampire novels and I write them as spy fiction because that's what you can do. You're totally right. Yeah.
I mean, you could choose to do a straight gothic vampire novel. You could do that. I would love to see someone do that. I often question myself, why does nobody just do classic horror? The closest thing I can think of in recent years was Penny Dreadful. But again, that got canceled because not everybody.
It went on for 3 seasons, which is pretty good for a. But I mean, I think a closer example of what you're talking about. And why what I was saying is not particularly useful unless you're saying you're only going to watch old movies, which is a danger that all of us face occasionally, is Guillermo del Toro with Tom Hiddleston made a straight-up gothic romance movie. Straight up. Exactly followed the formula, no deviations, no innovations, and it was exactly the way those movies work, or rather the way those books work, and he made a movie. And what's it called? I'm blanking on the name now. The Crimson Peaks. But people were not enthused about that because it wasn't. It wasn't one of those elevator pitch where you go, it's X but with Y. It wasn't. It was X. It wasn't a gothic romance but with aliens. It was just a gothic romance, and it is possible that you can't have a straight example of some of these older genres without some innovation that will cause it to be different enough that people will still come out and watch it. Which is funny because people, in my experience, don't particularly have long memories. So what difference would it make if?
Well, I just had a conversation with a young person today who says that he has a hard time watching black and white movies even if they're contemporary. Like he said that he's never seen
really
Ed Wood. He's never seen Ed Wood. He's never seen Raging Bull.
He has a hard time seeing it, I guess.
He just says it doesn't hold his attention. So I was like, man, there's all these, hasn't even seen Young Frankenstein. He can quote a bunch of other Mel Brooks movies. It's like, oh yeah, I tried to watch Young Frankenstein and I just couldn't get into it. And I was like, so you've never seen even any of the movies that it's parodying? And I was just like, and this guy likes movies. This guy likes movies. So, but I was like, you could take this older material for guys like that who aren't familiar with it and do it. Yeah. I think that it takes somebody more talented than me, but you could do that. But
does this person want to do things in movies, or are they just like movies?
He likes movies, and he likes movies. He'll go back as far as the 60s, But if there's not color, forget about it. And I'm not, and he's not a stupid guy, he's somebody who I enjoy. I'm not trying to
no, I'm with you.
Make fun, but I was deeply troubled by this because I was like, you like film. You need to be able to watch some of these movies.
Yeah, surely all of this takes is some practice. Honestly, that's like talking to somebody who goes, "Yeah, go ahead, Tony."
This goes back to I don't know.
I hear your weariness.
This is a problem that's so prevalent. This is my old person, and maybe it's because I'm old or whatever. Like, there's a wealth of history. There's so many beautiful black and white movies. If you say I love movies and they go, I can't watch black and white. I can't watch subtitles. I can even understand that because sometimes language barriers freak people out, but I can't watch a thing that isn't full color. It's, to me, becomes the next, like, I can't watch it if it's not on YouTube, which I've actually experienced from a person young enough. Like, if it's not on YouTube, why should I even watch it?
Are you
I
serious?
don't think it's can't. I think it's just don't want to. I just don't want to. You know,
Yeah,
I mean, why would I
don't
watch
want
that?
to. Can't is don't want to at that point. They're synonymous. I mean, what you're saying is true, but it's I can't means I don't have the time, or my attention span is just so incredibly crappy.
Yeah, but that's just
Or my friends
preferences.
are.
I mean, that's like saying that you're going to get on somebody because they are unwilling to spend time reading westerns, and you're like, westerns are the best books.
Well,
It's like,
it's
well,
cool.
who cares if they like
No.
westerns or not? That's
I think
their
it's
thing,
more
you
like,
know?
Julia,
It's more
another
like, I don't
metaphor
like
would
reading.
be,
It's less
I don't like reading,
Westerns.
or I
like-
can't, if somebody said to you, I can't listen to music, I can't listen to a
No,
song that doesn't have words.
why is black and white movies like reading? That's not the same. It's
You
it's
said,
a
"Ethan,
kind
I
of
like reading.
movie.
I
It's
don't
not
like-"
the whole thing of
Yeah,
movies.
okay,
Now it is
it's
like saying I
closer
don't have a
to-
TV.
No,
I don't have a
it
TV,
is
I don't watch
closer-
TV.
It is closer to saying I read magazines. I don't read novels.
I agree with
I
that.
disagree.
read
I
comics.
disagree
I
that-
don't read novels.
I disagree that just because something is old, it's suddenly better. I mean, I like black and white films,
That's
but
not, I don't think that's what we're
begrudge
saying at
them.
all.
Never-
Because this
That
guy's
isn't what
saying,
that isn't what I was saying. I was saying that he was missing out on movies.
I
that he
never said
probably-
black and white was better. I am saying there's a wealth of movies that inform you. If you only go back to a certain point,
Yeah.
you have missed a history that has informed the things that you like, the things that have informed those color movies, those Technicolor movies. You have stopped at a point and you have said, I refuse to accept or push past the things that these films were influenced by. And I think if you gain, this is a world where you can gain a broader spectrum. This is why when I took art classes, I was not a big fan of modern art, although I took a modern art class and gained much more appreciation. Oh, that's why that is. Also why it was informed. And I think that
Right, but
is a
that's
problem.
if you're okay. So you're talking about, like, if you're talking about a person who claims to be an expert on films, then yes. But if you're talking about somebody who just wants to watch a movie and enjoy it, who cares if they have the wealth of or the
If you
breadth
say
of
I
the
enjoy
history of
movies,
movies,
it's
film?
That's
depressing.
my point. That was my point. Is that I was concerned that he was missing out on movies that I think he would enjoy.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that's just he doesn't. I mean, I could say, you really need to try caviar because caviar's, like whatever, and you can be like, no, I'm not eating that. That sounds disgusting.
but I don't
and
think
I
it's
could be
like
disappointed,
caviar.
but it's not.
It's
Who
not.
cares?
It's more like,
or maybe we're just all pretentious vampires.
No.
Maybe
But
Jim
Julie, if you
Jarmusch-
say I'm a
maybe
foodie,
Jim Jarmusch was right.
if you say
There's-
I'm a foodie and I refuse to check out caviar, if you are, I am a gourmand, and yet I refuse to check out caviar, that's closer.
I am a gourmand, but I'm sure as hell not eating raw fish eggs. That's fine. I just couldn't care less if that's what you think. Because I'm not going to be like, oh, well, you can't call yourself a gourmand then.
Yeah, but it is
Just
deeply.
care.
But Julia, wait, wouldn't you agree that it's deeply troubling if somebody just straight up tells you that they lack curiosity? That's deeply troubling to me.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like if somebody were to say, and look, Tony's not a big country fan. I'm not a huge country fan, but if I run into somebody and they go, "Oh, I like music, but I will never listen to country," I don't want to hang out with somebody whose mind is that closed. I mean, that
No,
just
I
seems
think that's
weird.
very narrow of you because the world is a big place.
I'm
and
narrow?
There's not room. It was like
I think
I was
you've
telling
gone
you
way,
the other day,
way off
Jason.
topic, and I'm
I
sorry.
was
That's all
telling,
right.
no,
Okay.
but I was
I'm
telling
interested.
Jason the other day that for him to be all uppity about somebody not knowing who somebody was, that Jason knew who it was, somebody, a historical figure, can't remember who it was. I'm like, that is so obnoxious because you don't know who, I guarantee you, 99.9 of the famous black people have been in history because you just don't know. And so all the black people can be like, you should know that, and you don't. And it's the same. It's like, why are you deciding that because you know this person, then that's the important piece of information to have? I think it's
You're
the
right.
same thing here with film. It's like, if just because you guys think this is part of what's important. I mean, do you happen to know all the YouTubers? You know, maybe that's what that person thinks is more important, is that the current
difference.
YouTubers, you know, I don't know. I just don't care. You know, I think it's great if you want to learn about the history of film, but it's so unimportant in the grand scheme of things.
I'm just saying, I feel
make my
sorry.
closing point.
If somebody goes, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Tony. Go ahead.
I understand where you're coming from. And by no means would I be a gatekeeper or turn somebody away because they don't know something. There was plenty of music when I was growing up. If I had known a gatekeeper person, you can't know metal unless you know this. You can't know punk unless you know this. I would have never known what I found out. What I do agree with Jason. If I don't know who a YouTuber is, but I tell you, I have zero curiosity in ever thinking about ever finding that out, then to me it saddens me. I'm not going to not be.
Yeah, you'd be in the wrong.
I guarantee you there are plenty of people out there who would say, I have no interest in knowing who any YouTubers are. And they think that makes them great.
That's fine.
Can we get back to the? I'm really sorry that I brought this up. Can we get back to the movie?
No, I think it's fascinating.
I'm glad you brought it up.
I think we've exhausted the movie. It fits
into the conversation of the movie. We should definitely wrap up our final. I think last week's experiment.
I think what we discovered is that we are all the pretentious vampires that Jim Jarmusch thinks we are.
Exactly. That's probably true.
Zombies. We're all the zombies. We're the pretentious zombies. It's even worse.
We're the only lovers left alive.
Aren't they all one and the same in the end?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think you know what? Last week's experiment of putting the final thoughts and endorsements together, I'm not sure if that completely worked. I think I'd rather get people's final thoughts. We can just keep it short, you know, so that we can pretend it's the McLaughlin group, and you can shout out random adjectives and then go on. So just to wrap up,
no,
right,
wrong.
End of civilization. You know, yes. So it was Drew and then Tony and then Julia and then me. So Drew, final thoughts. Only lovers left alive.
First off, what a great title for a movie, if nothing else. I do like the title a lot.
Wrong.
Whatever. Wow. Okay. I think I liked this movie. I don't know that I loved it. I'm glad that I watched it. I don't think it's going to be even. I don't think it's a movie that's going to end up in my rotation. I feel like I probably won't revisit this movie a whole lot. Like even within Jim Jarmusch's filmography, I feel like that there's definitely movies that he's done that I like a lot better than this. It's got a lot going for it. You know, it has a lot going against it. And again, I think this could just be me bringing my own baggage, but I think I was slightly disappointed because a lot of people whose opinions I really respect talked this movie up, and then I saw a lot of people on our Facebook group saying that they wanted us to do this. I was a little disappointed that this really didn't have anything original about vampires in it. Like that would have been the thing I would have liked to have seen of it, but I liked it mostly honestly for the last scene, because I really do feel like, you know, we end the movie with the two vampires about to go attack this couple, and I feel like, well, that's when the typical horror movie would start, with the vampires attacking a couple in some European city. You know, so this is really the movie that shows what vampires get up to when they're not stalking victims, and that's my final thought.
Excellent. Tony, final thoughts. Only lovers left alive.
Yeah, I'm with Drew, and it's a beautiful film, and there's lots of great bits in it. There's lots of pieces I really enjoyed. And again, I mean, anytime we discuss this, like, now I am having to think about what's the nature of pretension, and, you know, is an auteur satirizing themselves, or is this supposed to be deep? Is it not? Like, all that stuff and all that, you know, all the things we talked about. For me, the veneer kind of was swept away, and I found myself wanting, perhaps, I don't know if I was wanting more, because I knew exactly what kind of movie this was, and I have no problem with seeing, you know, long character pieces. But I will say I'm with Drew that I wish there had been a little bit more vampire things I hadn't seen. Again, in its defense, though, perhaps this is a vampire movie for people who aren't horror/vampire fans. Maybe that was the point, in fact. was to if you like Jim Jarmusch, you want to see what he does with vampires. Maybe you haven't read a bunch of Anne Rice, so it could be what we brought into it yet again changes how this is. So while it probably wouldn't go in normal rotation, I am really glad I finally saw this. I don't know why it took me so long to view it. It's beautifully shot. There's lots of great bits, but don't know if I would revisit it on the regular.
Excellent. Julia, final thoughts.
Well, I was just joking about yelling out wrong, but actually I didn't like the title at all because I keep forgetting it. I swear I cannot remember the damn title. I was just like, what is the name? I think I asked Jason 4 times, like, what's the name of this movie again? So it just didn't stick with me. It's a nice poetic title, but it doesn't stick with me. I think that's kind of the way the whole film is. It's kind of nice and poetic, but doesn't stick with me. It's, it is attractive. The acting is definitely interesting. I certainly like all the actors. All of the 5 leads are great. And so that has that going for it. I loved Morocco. I thought it was so beautiful. But I just did not care for the script, and I did not care for the story or lack thereof, and I just felt very bored. I mean, it was very sleepy the whole time. So, not a huge fan.
Excellent. Okay, and I was very this movie I found to be slow and depressing, and the thing I was most sort of depressed about was my lack of interest in what I was watching. I agree. This ultimately seems like a deep vampire movie for somebody who's never seen a vampire movie before or hasn't seen one in a while, so all this stuff will seem really fresh and clever, but to me it just seemed like a rehash of a lot of vampire stuff we've seen before, but of course in the kind of skillful delivery package that Jim Jarmusch is capable of. And so he's got great performances, but there's no way I would ever watch this movie again. I mean, it's impossible that I would ever approach this.
Well, would you
I've
watch
got it.
Embrace of the Vampire again?
In a heartbeat. I would watch Embrace of the Vampire tonight.
No. Now,
see, I mean, yeah.
If you do want to see a movie I would watch many times again that I feel is a very interesting character piece, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which sadly for your friend is in black and white. That's a whole other thing. A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, I would watch many, many times, and is very much a character piece and is very atmospheric. And succeeds.
Embrace the Vampire is a terrible movie, just to be sure. But I would like play it while I was working, as just sort of a background of kitschy vampire literature. And to me, that's oddly enough, that's something that I want to be around more than whatever this is. Maybe that's a failing on my own part. I'm
I think that's personal taste.
Yeah. So there we go. I think it's unlikely that I'll watch Embrace of the Vampire again, but I'd watch Lips of Blood again, to name another sort of meandering vampire film. But yeah. But Lips of Blood was so completely confused that there's room for the subconscious work to come through. I think the more deliberate the work is, the less it interests me, if that makes sense. So, okay, here we go. We should do our endorsements. I'm dying to know what you guys have been up to over the past week, and I found something cool that I want to share as well. Drew, do you have anything to endorse?
Yeah. Well, first off, I just received a copy of Scarred for Life, Volume 1, the 1970s, and I apologize if I get the name wrong because I'm not looking at the book right now, but Stephen Brotherstone, which is an English book. It's about English horror and English pop culture and how it twisted the minds of a generation. And I'm going to be reading it. I will give a more thorough review when I actually finish it. But I was thankful for the free copy, which, it's always nice to get that sort of stuff.
For sure.
I binge watched the Santa Clarita
Wait, really
Diet,
quickly, that was called Scarred for Life, did you say?
Scarred.
Okay.
Scarred for Life.
Got it. Okay. All right. You binge watch. Go ahead.
I binge watched Santa Clarita Diet last Monday, which is a new direct to Netflix sitcom. It's by the same people that did Better Off Ted, which was
Drew Barrymore, right?
Which was I loved that show. I thought that show was brilliant, and it was one of the few sitcoms that I actually have enjoyed from any time in recent history. This show, it has Timothy Oliphant. I think I'm pronouncing that guy's last name right.
Oliphant, yeah.
Oliphant.
Or Oliphant. Yeah.
And Drew Barrymore, and it's best described as Dexter meets the Munsters. How's that for an elevator pitch? They're realtors, and Drew Barrymore's character dies and comes back as a zombie and has to eat people. And it's mostly just like it's like a 28-minute long sitcom, and them dealing with maintaining her as a member of the undead and also their regular life. And it's very dark, it's very violent, it's also very funny. It's got a great supporting cast. It's got Nathan Fillion, it's got Patton Oswalt. It's just got a lot of good actors they bring in for just the bit parts, and you can watch the whole thing in an afternoon. So I enjoyed it.
Cool.
Wonderful. Julia, what do you got going on?
I have just discovered This Is Us, and I'm super into it. It's so good. Everybody's been talking about how good it is, and I'm like, okay, I got to see it. And so I'm binge watching that, the first season, and it's just from the first episode, I was completely hooked. So that is a great, again, for somebody like me who enjoys drama and crying, this is a really good show. It feels very nostalgic, not just because there is a lot of scenes, flashbacks to previous decades, but also just because it feels like Ken Olin is one of the directors and writers, I guess, or producers, I don't know. But anyway, he's from 30-something, and he's done a lot of directing over the years, and so I think that's part of it. Is it just feels like 30-something, or like what did you say, Jason? It felt like.
I thought I said 30-something, actually. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was something else, too. But anyway, you said something from the 90s. I can't remember what it was. But, anyway, it's just a really, really great program. You just fall in love with all the characters immediately.
I have been surprised at how just it's just a regular family drama, and yet they've been so expert at creating characters who you're very interested in what they're going to do from minute to minute. None of them are crazy. There's none of the sort of fakeness of a lot of modern dramas where everybody's sort of extreme in one way or another. There's none of that here. It's just a very compelling family drama. Yeah, I agree. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Did you want to go on?
No, that's it.
Okay. My endorsement is Missing Richard Simmons. Missing Richard Simmons is a new podcast that blew my mind. It is about this guy who was a friend of Richard Simmons and is also a radio producer and other stuff. And he had several times attended Richard Simmons' aerobics class, which Simmons taught at his own studio for many years, for like 40 years. And then as of about a year and a half ago, Richard Simmons just up and disappeared. And there's only been a few like weird stories here and there, like cops being called out. Maybe he's inside, maybe he's not. Nobody knows exactly. So nobody right now knows what's going on with Richard Simmons exactly. And who exactly is in constant contact with him or not, and why he chose to drop out of his own life. And so it's very strange, and the podcast is not exploitative. It is a very interesting sort of recap of who this guy was, why he was such an important media emperor, basically, and what exactly happened to cause Richard Simmons to just up and disappear. Cool stuff. And it's only on like its second episode. Probably the third episode will go up this week. So I was truly amazed by that. So you got to check out Missing Richard Simmons.
I'm gonna say watch A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. That director is awesome, and I've gotten to see her live, and she's super cool and great. And I think that movie is really great. And also, one of the high points of this film was White Hills. So go find some awesome psychedelic. That's your taste. Find some cool White Hills psychedelic music because they're pretty rad. I'll go with that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Wow, this has been a really fun discussion. I have a feeling that I mean, first of all, we've really crossed the gamut in sexy vampire movies. I'm going to put together a playlist based on our YouTube page that has all of the sexy vampire movies we've done. So it'll go all the way back to things like Blood and Roses and Daughters of Darkness and so forth. And these ones, we have crossed oceans of time to discuss sexy vampire movies, and so it's gone well.
I do find it interesting that in our talk about pretension, we work through our own pretension.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Absolutely.
Sorry I apologize if that is uninteresting, and hopefully you will think about things as well. But this episode could go either way. People could be like, "You're not talking about horror, you guys. This is jump the shark," or they might. This is stupid. You lost me. Or it might be, that's, maybe off topic is fine. I don't know. My guess is people wonder why the hell we do this. and why don't we talk more about the actual horror? So, I don't know.
Whatever. It's got vampires in it.
I believe in our listeners.
No, I'm talking about all the other.
I think our listeners are ready to follow us, honestly. I really do. I think they'll because I think we're on topic. I think our topic, travels really wide anyway, but this is a vampire movie, and we're talking about what it is exactly about vampire movies that brings us back to them over and over. And pretension is a hard topic to avoid when it comes to that. So, all right. All I have to add to that is we may very well come back with yet more sexy vampires, but I think that's enough for this retrospective this time around. There will always be more, so we will get back to it in the same way that the Stephen King retrospective never ends. It just takes breaks occasionally. So next week, I think we'll probably be back with something just in memoriam for Bill Paxton, who just tragically left us this week. So in the meantime, we absolutely want you to come to the Facebook page. Let us know if we are just absolutely pretentious and full of shit, or if we're onto something, or somewhere in between. And we will totally engage in those conversations. We love it. And thank you. Oh, and leave reviews. If you've been listening to the reviews or the interviews or the anything, leave reviews on iTunes, because those reviews get syndicated out to everything, and it totally helps people find the show. So, Tony, Julia, Drew, thank you so much for being on. It was a delight, and we will talk to you next week. Bye, everybody.
Night.
Night.
Right.
Night.